Live from WRUE in Tennessee, it's the Scribbling Woman.
I think that's the best part of the whole podcast. Hi, I'm Nancy Rue. I'm a scribbling woman, and so are you, and that's why we're having this conversation. Here, in the midst of a challenging publishing climate, we talk about the writerly life that's unique to you, no matter your age, your season, or where you are in the pursuit of your creativity, even if you think you're nowhere. You are now an official Scribbly, so let's chat. And we are going to chat today. Jim, who's with us?
From Murfreesboro, Tennessee, it's Haylee Phillips.
You may never get an introduction like that again in your life, Haylee. Love it. Love it.
It was great. Thank you,
So
Jim.
Haylee is the youngest guest so far that we've had on the podcast, but that doesn't mean she's inexperienced. At 24, she has a degree in creative writing, and she currently is a copywriter for the Dave Ramsey organization. Is that right, Haylee? Yeah. Oh,
Yes,
excellent.
Ramsey
She
Solutions.
does emails and
Yeah.
scripts for radio and all manner of other writerly things. But I hadn't heard from Haylee in a
Yes.
long time. And out of the blue, about a month ago, I got an email from her. And I remembered her immediately from the teen and tween blogs I used to have, 15 years ago, maybe? Is that about right? Yeah. Those were two separate groups
Yep.
of mini women, and we talked just about daily about how to apply faith outside the Sunday school room. And those were some pretty lively groups, and Haylee was right in there in the midst of it. And here she was emailing me after I hadn't heard from her in 10 years. And sadly, she gave me a little bit of a background on her growing up years in, to quote her, a cultish fundamentalist Christian denomination. She's going to tell you a little bit more about that momentarily. The salient point for me in that email was this: you were the first Christian voice outside my family to teach me about love. You helped me learn how to think critically about my faith. After I read that email, I decided that if I died that night, I would die extremely happy. Because in a time when a lot of us are wondering, why do we keep writing? That was the answer to that question for me. That's why I wrote then, and that's why I write now. And so, Haylee, can you tell us just a little bit more about your background in this sort of legalistic denomination, just so we have a little bit of context for our conversation?
Yes. So it's called the Independent Fundamental Baptist Movement. And I'm not here to talk about it in depth, but it was basically very legalistic. There's a couple documentaries about it if you guys want to go look them up, but very strict on women and girls, and lots of dress regulations and thought control, emotion control, all the typical things you would think of a cultish group. Luckily, my family has made their way out of that and is experiencing a more vibrant faith life now. But those years where I was 8, 9, 10, 11, your audience back then was teens and teen girls. And it was right around that time that I started questioning things and thinking about why do we say this? Why do we believe this? And you were one of those safe places where I could go to talk about that with other girls and with you as our mentor. And it was really special. It really was a little bit of light let in for me.
I love hearing that. And I remember at one point when you were about 16, you actually wrote a guest blog post called Nudges from Haylee. And I uncovered it and sent it to Haylee. That was really kind of your beginning to talk about this faith reconstruction, even at 16. So where are you now in terms of your relationship with that past?
Right now, I'm working through it. I think, when you grow up like that, you'll always be working through it to some extent. Um, but I've found a really safe place in the Anglican church. And um, what was kind of a full circle moment for me was talking to our new priest about, learning about the history of the Anglican church and how they are connected to Episcopalian churches. And I remember, oh, Nancy mentioned something about that when I was 10. I remember her saying something, about that denomination. Maybe that was, God back then kind of connecting me to one of my people,
I like to
or,
think that. And welcome to the
um,
Anglican Communion,
you know,
by the way. In our previous conversation, you
thank you.
talked about that form of Christianity became like a thread that keeps unraveling. Yeah, you said, if this is
Yes.
Christianity, I don't want it. And if this is Christianity, I don't want it. That's sort of your way of unraveling that tapestry, right?
Yes. Yeah. Once you start thinking critically about things, if you keep going and you keep going, it just kind of unravels. And that ties into I worked in also kind of a cultish environment last year,
Mm-hmm.
2022, 2023. It was a really toxic Christian nonprofit, and it was another layer of that thread unraveling for me that I reached a point where I realized the faith I used to have is gone. Life, life blew it up, and I need to build a new one. And I need to, I don't want to just, get rid of
Yeah.
it completely, but I
And
need to
that's
build
pretty
something new.
amazing, actually, at 24. A lot of people get into their 40s um, and either come to where you are or they turn away from Christianity completely. Did you ever consider doing that?
I did at points, but I think from, little glimmers that I picked up growing up from you, from my family, from other people in my life, other mentors, other writers, um, I was able to see what was
So
love and what was
often
not
it was
love.
writers who did that for you, and I'll always savor that the blog and the books played a part in giving you some roots for your faith and made the journey feel safer. And now you want to write about that. Can you tell us? You shared with me a metaphor that I would love for you to talk about.
Yes. Is
Mm-hmm.
it the
Yes.
Isabel
Yeah.
Allende one? Yeah. Okay. So this is from one of my favorite fiction authors, Isabel Allende. She
Do.
says, I'm going to read it from my notes here. Um, she says, writing is a long process of introspection. It's a voyage toward the darkest caverns of consciousness, a long, slow meditation. I write, feeling my way in silence, and along the way, I discover particles of truth, small crystals that fit in the palm of one hand and justify my passage through this world. So that metaphor, particularly for me, it feels kind of like what happened. Like you had some particles, some little truth crystals that you had in your writing journey that you passed along to me. And even I feel like we pass them along, and the person maybe doesn't even know they need them, but then you have them when you need them. And that's kind of what happened for me. And so I would love
So
to
pass on some
do that for
truth
someone else
crystals,
one
which is
day.
now my new favorite phrase of all time. So you're just beginning, and you have some questions before you actually plunge into this whole writing thing. What are your questions?
Oh, there's so many. One of the ones we talked about before was, is it arrogant of me to want to write about this when I'm still so young? I think I'm used to knowing a lot of authors that just like write things like, and having no credentials or anything. So I don't want
Well,
to come
I
across
can
like
sort of
that. So
address that
that
question
was
for
one.
you if you like. I don't think it is arrogant at all to know what you know and know that this is something that needs to be written about. That is an arrogance. That is not arrogance. That's knowing. I think where people go wrong is that they plunge right in before they've completed the sort of recovery journey. And that's not arrogance. That's just eagerness to get it out there. And I always advise against that. At one point you will know, wait, I'm talking to someone and they're hearing me and they're nodding and they're saying, this is life-changing for me. That's when you know that it's time. Yeah. Yeah. What other question? What's your
That's
next
really neat.
question?
Yeah. So kind of connecting, how do I know when I'm ready in terms of skill
It's a
and
really
just
great question
emotionally?
because, again, this time of your life is really about honing your craft, which doesn't mean you shouldn't write articles and things and submit them for publication. But before really getting into a major project, attention needs to be paid to the art. And that goes on, of course, for your entire writing life. I'm still learning things at age 73. Um, but you will reach that moment when maybe you're in a workshop or you're reading a writing book, you're listening to some mentor, and you realize, I know this, I've heard this. And I will also tell you, Haylee, personally, that having read just our email exchanges, you're there. And that degree in creative writing didn't hurt you any. So you really are ahead of the game when it comes to that. Yeah. What's your last question?
Thank you. How do I decide how to write about it? Sometimes I want to write this nonfiction book. Sometimes I want to go George Orwell on
George
everyone and write a
Orwell,
great
is that what you said?
satire.
Okay, I
Um,
love that.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes it comes out in poetry. So,
Well,
I'm
I think the
wondering
first
how do
thing
I
that comes to my
choose?
mind is, oh, totally go George Orwell. But that's just because it sounds fun. Um, I'm thinking part of that decision is just trying it out with each one. Play a little bit with poetry, play a little bit with nonfiction, even create a fictional piece. Although you did say to me you really felt like that might be hiding behind some fake characters, and yeah, it has to be.
Yeah.
Well, as you go through these and you practice with them and play with them, you'll discover your sweet spot. And the other part of that is that it doesn't have to be done just one way because you can write that nonfiction book, you can put together a collection of poetry, you can write short stories about it, you can blog about it. It's kind of like being a pastor, and they will tell you that usually they only have one sermon, really, the kernel of it. And every time they preach, they just add a brushstroke to it. And until you've written all that you want to write about this particular topic, there's so many ways that you can do that. And I can see you doing all of the above. Um,
So
yes,
the answer
yes
is
to that,
yes.
right? One of the things I advise young writers to
That's
do
great.
when they're first starting out is to discover their process. And you're really doing that. Can you tell us a little bit about the process that you've just kind of encountered?
Sure. Sometimes I feel like it's a little more of a collection. I
Right.
don't like think it like, oh, this is my process, but you kind of helped me see it is a process. Um, I'll start with just free writing in a journal and kind of
Yes, you
just
are.
scribbly,
There's a reason for
scribbling
that.
woman. And then, um, and then I'll write that'll come out kind of angry and snarky, and then I'll soften it into some poetry, and then I'll translate it into some nonfiction. So that's kind of how things tend
That sounds
to
like an amazing
come
process.
out.
And you just discovered it, you came upon it. And that's the way the best processes are shaped. No one can tell you, well, first you need to do this, and then you need to do this. And in fact, that's what this whole this whole podcast is about, is finding your unique path. And you're already doing that. You're very intuitive. And I know you probably have a lot of practical questions like, when do I look for an agent and all of that. But I want to delve into one that you posed to me. You said how do I
Right.
find other writers? Tell us why that's important for you, Haylee.
Yeah. So I wrote it down here. Finding other writers is important to me for two main reasons that I've been feeling maybe over the last year or so. Um, number one, community is important. I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah.
obvious in any area of life. Uh, and those truth crystals we talked about, they don't just come from nothing. They don't come from nowhere. They come from each other and from passing them along from friend to writer to reader to family members. So that's important to me. And then number two, I want writing to be tangible. I don't know if maybe this is something that resonates with my generation, kind of
And
the
you have
anxious
reason to be.
generation. Yes, but it's really easy. I think writers are in our heads a lot and not in the, oh, you're so emotional, you're a writer
Emo,
kind of
right?
way. But yeah, in like literally in our heads because there's so much going on up there and there's so many ideas and just like it never ends. And so for me, it's important to have like human friends and human connection. And I think even the internet makes it feel like you can have that connection
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
follow other writers or you watch their videos on YouTube. But there's something about tangibly having like human
Yes.
writer friends that you can call.
We
Or you can
will
get
be
together
having
and get
coffee because you
coffee.
live less than an
And
hour from here. Just saying. It's exciting.
I
Yeah.
know that'll be exciting.
Well, Haylee,
So
I'm
yeah, that's kind of
impressed that
what's important
you
to me.
have already come upon the concept that writing is not always this solitary profession where you go up in a garret and you get all moody and you turn to drink. We have to have a certain amount of alone time, obviously, to be able to get any writing done. But there really has to be a balance, and you already know that. Uh, I'm so excited that you are entering this realm because you've got so much of it together already. Um, so basically, then what you've helped me to sort of compile here is 4 pieces of advice for people just starting out, no matter what age you are, even if you're 60 and you've decided it's time. Become ready emotionally with your topic. Develop your craft continually doing that. Discover your process and then be in community with other writers. And that's the whole purpose of the Scribbling Women, which, by the way, you can find out more about on the website, which is nancyrue.com. Haylee, I hope you really feel
Yes.
confident about pursuing this writing thing. Is there anything else that you want to add or ask?
I don't think so. I'm looking forward to
Scribbly,
being a
you
fellow
are already.
Scribbly.
And by the way, Jim is
Yes.
officially one, even though he's a guy. Um, so with you to continue to carry the light with the written word, I just have high hopes for the future, Haylee. And in this whole season of the Scribbling Woman, we're going to be continuing to ponder really about why we write and what that looks like in a publishing atmosphere in which we have to really be creative in carving out a writerly life. And so if you don't want to miss an episode, of course, subscribe. And until next time, Scribblies, scribble on.